Welcome back to the SSAS and MDX training sessions. In last session, we discussed about calculations, creating calculated members, and to be honest, we looked at very basic calculated member and the properties here. And we have created dynamic sets and the static named sets, and what is the difference, and which one is better to go with. Most of the cases, people go with dynamic sets because it has to be evaluated dynamically, like top 10 customers or bottom 10 customers. Unless if it is some static expression like, okay, only this customer name, this is a static expression, you don't need to have it a dynamic here. So you can set it static for this kind of things. Now, in today's session, we will discuss a little bit about something that I've never worked on, that is scope statements, and if time permits, we will look into aggregations too. So the scope statement, if you see here a new script command, and it will open the script command and you can write the scope statement. Like, what is the use of scope? Scope is, if you write an MDX query, let's say this is your cube, okay, and if you write an MDX query, and it will be executed at cube level. Okay, this scope will limit the whole cube and it will create a subcube of it, and it will set some values for this. For example, if you have a measure ABC, you can have a different value or the value that you are interested, or if you want to modify or set some value for this particular subcube, you can set this. Let's say sales amount, and this subcube is year 2017. So during the year 2017 gives, instead of sales amount, show sales amount into 10. So all the values, if you query in your using your MDX, the values will be shown as sales amount into 10 for the year 2017. If you select, if you drag and if you filter by year 2016, then it will show the sales amount as usual. So you are modifying, or you are telling the server to give a different expression for the subcube. So a piece of the cube or subcube, whatever you call. So by default, the whole cube will be built, and on top of it, you can have your scope commands to limit that. Let me show you one simple example so that you will get the idea, and we will see different options we have in the scope. Before that, let me create a calculated measure. Let me delete this guy. And I'm creating a calculated measure. I'll name it as dummy, and I'll give this as null. And if I go and see the script, this is the calculated measure I've created. And if I deploy it now, I will be able to see this calculated measure dummy with the values null. Let me quickly deploy it. Null means it will not assign anything. It will be all blank. I don't need to process it because it's just a calculated measure added. And let me reconnect it. Looks like the cube is not processed. Let me process it. Okay, now let me reconnect it, and if I execute the query, this is the profit, and let me drag the dummy, and you see it has nothing. So I created an empty calculated measure now. Now let's set some scope for this one. So I can set the scope for this calculated measure to show some other value, or based on values based on the expressions. Let me set the scope for this. I've added a script. I'm naming it as scope. I hope you can see that I've typed scope. How can I change the font and all? The view designer, I don't see, but I will try to highlight it. I'm trying to set the scope for the calculated measure dummy. Okay, let me reconnect it so that it will show the dummy. So I'm setting the scope. So the scope statements generally will have three: the scope start, the scope end, and the expression. Now this is the scope start, and this is equal to, this means for this scope, for this particular measure, I want to assign the value total price, or let's say profit. So I'm assigning it. And the third one is end scope. So if you see, it's pretty straightforward. I set the scope for the dummy measure, the measure that newly created, and I'm assigning this scope value, the dummy value, to whatever that is there in profit. So the profit will be exactly copied to dummy wherever it is specified. So this is a simple scope statement. First, let's see this, and then we will try to have some um, different expressions so that you will understand the scope better. So once I've created it, I need to deploy this because I've added the scope statement. Okay, it's crying that there is some syntax error, some colon missing. Let's find out where it is. If you go to these expressions, if you see here after null, it is comma. It should not be a comma. It should be colon. That means this calculated measure is ended here, and oops, not this. Sorry, this visible and this scope, and so here you see there is an extra semicolon. So that is why it was throwing error. So let me delete it and let me deploy it now. And I deployed it. Let me go back to the browser, reconnect, and let me execute it, and let me see what the dummy is returning for us. So if you see the dummy, I'm just simply assigning whatever the value that profit is having. So it was blank till here, till this calculated member creation, it is blank. But after that, I created a subcube and I'm defining it. I'm setting a scope and value for the dummy measure. And for all the dummy measure values, just assign profit, whatever the profit it is. Now, if you browse it, let's say browse by customer, it will be assigning the same value as dummy. So I'm telling the server, just assign profit as is to the dummy. And it's a pretty straightforward one. The scope for this particular measure I'm setting, and this is equal to, which means this guy is equal to this guy, and end the scope. So this is a simple scope statement. Now, let's say I don't want to show the profit always. I want to set a scope to show only if the customer is some XYZ person. So you can set like that. You can limit the subcube. You can slice the subcube here. Here I'm not slicing anything. I'm just giving the dummy measure. Wherever the dummy measure is, just set it to the scope, set the value of profit. Now let's set that. Let's see how we can set that. Instead of setting the dummy, what I'm going to do here is I am going to filter for this particular customer. If you see tailspin toys and bricks.co from the customer dimension. So all these are MDX. You need to know MDX very well for this. Okay. So when this member is this, then set the profit. Else don't set the profit. So the scope, I'm altering the scope here. The scope is set to only one customer dummy value. So when the subcube is the dummy value of this particular customer, then only set profit value to the dummy. And now let's see what difference you will see in the scope values or the result set. So let me go to the browser, reconnect it, and execute it. And let me get my dummy here. Execute it. You see it's showing null. And bill to customer, it shows null. Okay. Now get the customer and execute it. You see value is coming only for this particular scope. I am setting the scope only for this particular subcube. For the value dummy, assign the profit. Okay. Now you got some idea, right? So earlier I set it for everything. The scope, the subcube I defined is for all the dummy measure. Wherever the dummy measure is, just assign profit. Now I'm restricting, I'm forcing the server to set only Andrix, CO for this particular customer, set the dummy value to profit. So this is how you can set the scope. Setting the scope means defining a different expression or defining the values for a particular subcube data. Now let's say few other functions that are very important here. And to set the scope very well, you need to know MDX. This is a tuple, I know, because I know MDX. But once we finish MDX, and as I mentioned, we'll revisit this calculations page. That's the time we can also have a quick check at the scope. Now, this is equal to measures of profit. What else I can show here? I can show something. I can write whatever I want. Like I want to show, I can do into multiplied by 100. And if I deploy this, the value should be, the value for the dummy measure should be multiplied by 100 for that particular customer. Let me drag that customer first, and let me drag the dummy. And if you see the value is pretty big compared to this one. It is multiplied by 100. So the expression will decide what should be the value. Okay, this particular expression. And this scope will decide what is the scope, where the value has to be, where this expression has to be assigned to which measure. So for this measure, this value only for this particular subcube. So this is how you can set the scopes. And you can also have nested scopes. For example, let's say I have defined it on highest scope, like at the dummy level. Whatever, wherever you have dummy, you can do it profit into 100. And if I go and create this nested scope, I'm creating one more scope inside that, and I'm giving this, and this is the expression end scope. So this is the end of the inner scope, this guy, and this is the end of the outer scope. So what it will do is initially it will take all the dummy measures, and then it will go for this, and then it will assign this value. Now let's see how it's going to work if I deploy it, and what will be the result set. So this is a nested, and you can have n number of nested scopes. Some semicolon is missing again. End scope, second. I see something is extra here. I think this this is extra. So now let me deploy it. So this is a big problem with calculations. The error messages, it will not give you proper error message, and you have to understand, you have to go line by line and figure it out what the exact error is. So let me reconnect it, and let me go to my customer, and let me go to my dummy. And if you see, so first it tries to assign at the highest level, and then it will filter the sub level. So the value that you have specified, the expression you have specified, where you have specified, is very important. So this takes the scope. First it will go at this scope, like for all the places where the measure is dummy, and then the expression is specified. This is one more filter, we call it as. Okay, so for this particular customer only, set this value. Now, can you guess what will happen here? So I've given this is equal to profit outside of the scope, outside of the inner scope. And what will happen if I deploy it? Try to tell before I execute this query. What will happen? Will it show the values, or it will not show the values? So if you see here, so the values are showing as is for everything. So wherever the scope, wherever the outside dummy is, this shows the profit value, but it will be overridden. it will be overridden by the inner scope for only the value or for only the condition where the customer is tailspin toys and Rick CO. And only for this it will show into 100, I mean multiplied by 100. And if you can see that, so wherever it is, the value will be shown the same, and the inner scope will be overriding it. So the inner scope is only specified for only one customer. So this is very helpful when you have to set something like for a particular customer or for a particular reason. If you want to do something, you can have this scope statements. Generally, we will have case statements in calculations or if-else statements for the calculations. Here you can use the scopes instead of going for if-else statements. So this is the nested scopes. There is one more important function here, that is freeze. So freeze is very important. Let me explain you what freeze is. For example, I have two measures. Let me create two new measures. I'm taking an example, easy example, to make it to make you guys easily understand this. I'm setting M1 and the expression is 1, hard-coded value 1, and I'm creating one more calculated measure with the name M2 and setting it as null. So first we will discuss a simple example and we'll go to the complex example after that. So now M1 is 1, M2 is null. If I go here to the script view, you can see this is created, and if I execute it now or if I deploy it now, and let me show the values. So what will be the values for M1 and M2? It's pretty straightforward. It's a simple calculations. It will be 1 and null. Let me drag it, M1 and M2, and you can see M1 is 1 and M2 is null. Now I'm defining the scope for the measure M2. So I'm copying this scope M2. This is equal to M1. I'm assigning whatever the value that is there in M1, end scope. I'm ending the scope. Now if I deploy this, so I assigned a scope, I created a scope statement for the subcube of M2. Wherever it is M2, just assign M1 value, whatever the value that is there for M1. Now if I deployed it, and if I go to the browser and if I reconnect it, you can see when you drag and drop M1 and M2, you can see the M1 value is assigned to M2. Okay. Now let's discuss what is freeze. So here what I'm going to do here is I'm going to create one more scope. I'm copying and pasting instead of writing whole stuff again. And this time I'm writing for the M1, and the value was 1. I changed the value to 2. You remember the value for the M1 is set to 1. Now I change it to 2. Now what will happen when I deploy it? Will M2 show 1 or 2? Because M2 is scoped to the M1 and M1 I change to 2, then what will happen if I deploy it now? Will it show 1 or 2 for M2? Any guess? People are saying 1, and let's see what the value is. So whatever the end part, it will take that scope. So this scope assignment will trigger this one again. So wherever this has dependent, that will be triggered and it will be assigned again. So if you see, the value has been changed to 2 for M2 also. So people don't like this. I mean, this is not the ideal scenario. If they want to freeze it, they can freeze the value. So until here, the value of M1 is just 1, and by the time this M2 is executed, you are assigning M1 and you can freeze it. If you use the command freeze, then it will freeze the value and it won't apply any changes that happen to the measure afterwards. Like any other scope statements defined on M1 will not have any impact on the M2. Let me deploy this and see. And now, theoretically, it should show 1 for the M2 and 2 for the M1. Let me reconnect. This is the biggest problem. You have to reconnect and you have to execute again and again and again. And you see the value of M1 has been frozen over there. Sorry, M2 has been frozen. M2 will take whatever the value that is there. And if there is any scope defined for the M1, which is used as an expression in the scope statement of M2, it will not have an impact. It will freeze the value. It won't go on modify the value. So this is the advantage of freeze. This is a simple example. Now let's see a little complex example on how to use freeze and what is the use of freeze. Now let's see one example for the scope statement. I can copy the same scope statement, or let me write a new scope statement, or let me take it here. So what my intention is, let me go here before that once real quick, and let me go to the customer and execute. And if I go to the end, okay. So now let me quickly open Excel spreadsheet to demonstrate an example. Okay, let me connect to analysis services. I need to be careful. I need to select the database. Next, and finish. Yes. Okay. Now let me select, let's say M1, M2, let's say profit, and let's say customer. Okay, so these are too much. Okay, let's go with customer. And if you see, this shows 222, the value that we hard coded, and the grand total is showing as 2 because this does not have any aggregations. And this is a hard coded value assigned from M1, and this is the value, and you can see the grand total. The grand total is nothing but all statement. You remember we discussed about all member name during the dimensions. There is all member name, everything will be aggregated and rolled up to all. Now this is the all value, which is sum of the whole stuff. Let me go from here to top. Okay, this is the value. Now one second, let's see how can we set some scope for the all member here. What is my cube here? And let me go to the calculations. In the customer, there will be an all member, as you all know. I'm setting all member scope here for the measure dummy. Okay, so for the measure dummy and for customer all, I want to show some 1 2 3 4 5 hard coded value. Okay, I'm showing all dummy 1 2 3 4 5. I'm setting for the customer all. Let me deploy it real quick. So I'm telling the server for the subcube where the customer is all and the measure is dummy, go for 1 2 3 4 5 instead of a regular value, regular aggregated value. Let's see if it works. Refresh, and you can see this as is. And let me select the dummy too. And dummy shows the same values until all has come. So I'm overriding the all value. Instead of showing the total, show me this value. I am telling the server to change the value. Use this expression to show the all value. Similarly, you can change anything in the member. I showed you an example here, right? This value was changed. What is that value? This value was changed, right? So this is the scope. You can write, you can give a different expression. You can change it instead of if else classes or case statements in your calculations. You can use this to define the scope of a particular subset or subcube, and you can define whatever the expression you want to give. So this is a simple one. Like that, you can have a complex MDX queries too. Like for example, instead of this value here, show me the value of the customer. You see what I mean? Show me this customer value, this customer profit. So when I select a member, comma the measure, what it will do is it will show the let's say for example total price of this particular customer will be shown, or let's say profit. Instead of showing the all value, which is the aggregated value, I'm asking the server, I'm defining the scope, and I'm specifying the expression as show the value of this particular customer's profit. So this profit should be shown when I execute this. Let me deploy it. And let me let me refresh. Okay. And if you see, the value has been changed and it has given 130710, which is the profit value of this particular guy. So similarly, you can write complex MDX queries, MDX expressions to define the scope of a particular measure for a particular subcube. Okay, cool. Now we set the all value of the dummy, right? Now let's do something. Let's set the any one member value of dummy. I am redefining the scope for one of the members. Let me reconnect it right under this this scope definition. So let me get one customer name. Okay. So I'm trying to set this guy's scope instead of all, and I want to show for CO Bomar CO. Instead of this, I want to show 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So the total is set to profit of this guy, and this guy's value for the dummy is set to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, what will be the total and what will be the dummy? I mean, what will be the value for this Bomar CO? Any guesses while I deploy this? Okay, good, no guesses. So let me refresh it. I clicked on refresh. Where is that Bomar CO? I set it to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This has been 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This has been changed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whenever the measure is used, this particular measure for this subcube, which is this attribute member I've selected, this is fine. This has been set. And if I go back here, this is still showing the same value here. So whatever the value that has been set. So this is how you can specify members for each stuff, each thing. Wherever you want to have your expression for a particular scenario, you can define your you can define your scopes like this. Even you can do this. You can have a multiple members by using a tuple. Now, for when I say when I say tuple, you can have not only customers but also whenever this guy is the customer and this is the buying group, then only set this value. So here, if you see the scope, this is the group and this is the customer and this is the measure. Set the value 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now let me deploy it and see what will show for this combination. And if there is any data at all, we will see that. So I'm refreshing it all, and you can see the value has been changed back for Bomar from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It has changed back to the other one. And here, let me select that Bomar and filter only that guy. Okay, Bomar CO. And what is the other attribute that we have given? We have given buying group, right? Customer.buying group. And this guy's customer.buying group is tailspin guys. But whatever we have specified here is, yeah, see here. For tailspin guys, for this group, for this customer, the value has been changed. Now if I take out this one, the value is back to the normal, the dummy. And when I include this buying group, you can see the value has been changed to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So you can create any kind of subcube, and that subcube measure value will be assigned by the expression whatever you have given. This is really a beautiful option. If you have a use case, if you have a scenario where you need to specify some particular set of values, then you can go for these scope statements, and it really good at performance too. Okay, so once you know MDX, I mentioned you can play with it. Let me define one more scope here for let's say dummy again. Okay, I'm defining a scope for this measure. Let me go to here scope. I'm defining for this measure, and I'm creating a subscope. I'm selecting a particular attribute. Let me reconnect it. Let's say, for example, date dot members. All this is MDX. Okay. Now I'm ending both the scopes. The color is so bad. I'm sorry, guys. I'll try to change it. So end scope for these two, and I'm giving the expression here. This is equal to instead of this date dot current member, which means it will give you the current member, dot pre member, which means it will give you the previous member. This is all again MDX. So when we discuss about MDX functions, you will come to know about this. And comma, I'm gonna give what measure? Profit. So first I'll show you the data, and then I'll explain you what it is, what expression that I have written here. So this is the expression I've given for this particular condition and for this measure. So this is the subcube criteria, and this is your expression criteria. Now let me deploy it real quick. Deploy. And let me go to Excel, and let me take out the filters. I just want to have, I don't need this customer at all. I don't need this buying group. I have profit and dummy, and this filters has to be removed. This is still there. Okay. And where is the other one? So now let me get the total is set to 130710. I hope you remember that all of this is set to, if you see the expression here, if you see the scope statement here, the all is set to profit of this guy. That's why it is showing 13070. Now let me get the date, whatever the one invoice date dot date I have used. Let me get invoice date dot date into my rows. And if you see here, this is the first day, and this is the value, and this is the second day, this is the value, and this is the third day, this is the profit. But if you observe in the other one, in the dummy, the first is blank, and the second one is showing the first value of this, third one is showing the second value of this, fourth one is showing the third value of this. So it is one behind. It's going for one previous member and getting the value of it. And if you go now, I'll explain whatever the expression that I've given, I've written in MDX. So in MDX, I specified that set this for this particular scope, wherever you have the date attribute, whenever you have the date attribute, set for this, and get me the current member. Current member means this guy for this row, this guy for this row, this guy for this row, and go to its previous member, which means for this guy, this is the value. This is the previous member. For this guy, this is the previous member. For this guy, this is the previous member, and get me the profit of it. So in short, when this is the guy, current member, I'm asking the server to go to the previous member and get the profit and show it in the dummy value. So for example, for this guy, go to the previous value and get the value. Here it is blank, so place the blank here. So this is how the scope has two important things. One is defining your subcube, and defining the second one is defining the expression. So like this, if you have a scenario in your mind, you can write a beautiful nested scope statements to set the even few calculations you can calculate here using the scope. Like for example, previous period, current month to previous month, current year to previous year. So year on year calculations, all those things can be done easily using the scope statements. So let's quickly create one new calculator member using scopes. Let's say year on year or year on year percentage. Okay. So what is this year on year and what is this percentage, how it is calculated? I'll show you. So year on year percentage is basically current year sales to previous year sales. Sorry, current year sales minus previous year sales divided by current year sales. Something is a formula. Okay, let's try to write that one using scopes instead of calculations. So for that, let me create a new one. Year on year. Okay, and I'll set it to null initially. Okay, the year on year is created. Now let me create a scope for this. So it will be null by default, unless for those stuff that I've created the scopes. So I've created a scope statement, and let me end the scope. And let me create one more scope, because I want to have some value only if it is year attribute. So I'm selecting calendar year dot members. So whenever they selected year dot members, this scope will be triggered. And let me end this scope too. And I'm giving the expression here. This is equal to let's say we want to calculate for profit. Okay. Invoice date dot this date dot current member, which means it will give you the current member of profit. Whatever the year, whatever the member that it is showing, it will give you the value. And then I mentioned, right, subtracted by previous member dot previous member. So what it is doing is it is taking the current value for the year. Let's say, for example, 2012. It is taking 2012 profit minus 2011 profit. So it is going to calculate that for you. Let's quickly see. By deploying it. I'm deploying it, and oops. Again, some colon or something is missing here. Here it's missing. Here it's missing. Okay, now it should be good. Deploy. Okay, succeeded. Let me refresh it, and you can see year on year added. And before that, let me clean up all these guys before because we don't need this. Let me get profit, because it is all on profits, and let me get year on year. And no wonder it is null, because we defined the scope only for invoice years. So let me select invoice date dot year now. Calendar year. I hope this is calendar month, calendar year. Let me drag it into the year. Now, if you see this value, see first one 2013, which means 2013 value minus 2012 value. There is no 2012 value. That is why this minus 0, which means the same value. But if you go to this value is equal to this minus this value. Oops, it's showing good, so bad. Let me use calculator. So this value minus the previous year value, this gives you 2060110.2. So this is how you can calculate the sales gain compared to the previous year. So the current year, this is unknown. Actually, this is a wrong. We should not get this unknown. Year should be always some 2016 or 17. If you see this minus this will be here, and this minus this will be here. So this data was up to 2016 June or July. That's why you see less sales compared to the previous year. This is for full year and this is for only 6 months. That's why the sales is less and it is still in negative values. So this is year on year calculation. Let's say current year minus previous year, and you can also calculate year on year percentage using the scope simply by going with year on year, which is current year minus previous year divided by current year, I guess, if I'm not wrong. Divided by this into 100. You need to know MDX to write all these things. Just wait for that MDX sessions. So now let me refresh it, and you see it has been percentages. Now this value minus 0 divided by this value is 100%. This is 8% growth. This is 7% growth, 7.8% growth. This is minus 141% growth. So this is only 6 months, right? If you get more sales in the second half of the year, then this may be like 3% or 5% growth compared to the last year. So this is how you can make use of the scopes to define your subcube where you want to have this new expression to be assigned, and you can have your own expression. It is like calculating, or it's an alternate to the calculated members, kind of alternate to the calculated members. I can do the same calculation in using the calculated members, but for this scope you need to write if else or case statements. Or let me show you a simple example. I can copy the same expression. I'm going to the calculations. I'm naming it as year on year percentage. I can copy the same expression as is, and I can save it, and let me deploy it. And it's deployed. Now let me refresh it, and you can see year on year percentage here, and if I select it, it is showing the same values. So the calculation or scope, but the advantage with scope is the scope will be defined. Scope definition is easy. Now instead of calendar year, if I select something else, see here it's showing 100%. Let me drag something else. Let's say, for example, calendar month name. You see, this is calculating for everything and it is showing 100%, which is wrong, right? So you need to set the scope for this to calculate only if the current member is year, else show null. For that, I need to write a case statement in my calculation, which is a pain compared to the setting up the scope. Let me show you how to write a case statement. Case when is error of what you say, where is that attribute, calendar year, all this you have to write, dot current member or current member dot name is equal to all, then show null, else show this value n. So I'm setting the scope by using the case statement, by having some couple of conditions. Let's see how it's gonna return the results now when I deploy this cube. So here in the calculated member expression, I mentioned that if it is a calendar year dot current member, which means if the current member is selected, then, and if it is errored out, or if it is all, then show it as null, else go for the calculation. Let me quickly refresh it, and you can see the value has been gone. And now instead of calendar month, if I select calendar year, I think this is the calendar year. Nope, not this. This is calendar year label. Let me get the calendar year. Date, where is that calendar year? Let me expand this. Okay, calendar year is the first one, and now you see it is calculating. So this extra condition checks, instead of that, you can specify the scopes. So yesterday you asked one of you guys asked the question, can I create a calculated member with the same that I'm using for the scope, or if the same expression that I used in the scope? Yes, you can. This is an example for that. So both are very powerful. Scope advantage is it is comparatively better in performance to this. Particularly if you have to use ease error, this is very poor in performance compared to using the scope. So this is about the scope statements. Do you have any questions, guys? Okay, cool. So let's discuss about the scope of the calculations, which will be the last topic on this calculations page. So the scope of the calculations are, as far as I know, there are 3 different scopes of the calculations. The first one is database level scope, and which means the calculations that you create here. You see, if you go to the script command, you can see a create, calculator, measure, and so on. See here, create member cube. It will be created at the cube level, and it will be permanent for the whole database, and any user who can query this can get the result from this. So the other 2 scopes are query scopes. Let me show you an example for that. Let me connect to analysis services, and let me go to wide world works DB. This is so poor in performance, particularly my machine. Okay, let me go to wide world importers, new query, and I'm using one of the calculation that I've created. Select, let's say, dummy on 0, comma, customers on 1. Don't worry too much about this. I'm just concentrate about the scope here, scope of the calculated measures. So if I execute it, it gives me the data, and I can have non-empty. So this particular calculated measure dummy is created at database level, and it will be available for anyone who access this cube, who has access to this cube. Now, this is one scope of the calculated measure. The next scope is you can create it at the query level, at the query window level or connection level, whatever you call. Create member current cube dot t as 1. Okay, I'm executing it. A cube must be specified for this command to work. Let me add the cube name. Okay, I created a calculated measure here in this query window, and the name of it is T. Let me select T in my list of results, and if I execute it, it gives me dummy as well as T. So this is called connection level calculated measure. So the first one is cube level or database level. This is connection level. So as long as I have this connection, I can execute n number of times. I don't need to execute this. This is one time done. I executed, and I don't need to execute it again. This is at the connection level. And if I copy the same query into the next one, and if I execute it, it says that this particular T is not available because this T is available only at this connection level. And if I execute it here, it runs n number of times as long as I close this connection. Okay, so this is at the connection level. So this connection will have this calculated measure created. Until I close this connection, this will be available. and this dummy will be available in every place because this is a database level. We created it at the database level, and it can be used by any guys who is using this cube. Now the third one is query level. With member, you don't need to specify the cube name and all here. You just need to specify T, because this is the query level, and in query anyhow you are gonna specify the cube which it has to be assigned to. So I'm giving as test as Ru is a trainer, and I'm calling this test here. So if I execute this, it will not work, or if I execute this, it will not work. So this with keyword says that this is a query level calculated member, and this should be followed by a query. If I execute the whole, oops. Okay, if I execute it on the whole, then only it will work. If I execute only this part, it says the test is missing. If I execute only this part, it won't be accepted. It is a query level, so this is tagged at the query level, and you cannot run the same in any other place, or even in the same query window without calling the test. So this is called as query level. So there are three scopes for the calculated member. One is database level, and second one is connection level. This is the connection level. I executed this part only once, and you have to specify the cube name or the database name where you want to where you want to create this for which you want to create the calculated measure, and then you can use it n number of times in the same connection but not in the other connection. And the third one is query level, which should be accompanied by the query. If there is no query and no call for the calculated measure, it will not be executed. This is how you can create a query level, and this can be used to rename your, for example, I don't want to show this dummy. Instead of this dummy value, I want to show the same under test. So in that case, I can simply use measures dot dummy. So it is like alias, as one of our friends asked, how can I create alias? So the dummy value will be under test now. So this expression, this is the expression after as, and if you go to the calculations, this is the expression. And if you go to the scopes, this is the expression. All these are the expressions which tells the analysis services what needs to be calculated, evaluated to, and written as the result set. So it's all based on your MDX knowledge. How much you know about the MDX, you can write different complex calculations, complex expressions to get the values. And all these expressions are on aggregated data. That is the advantage. You can do magics with these calculations if you know MDX really well. So in short, there are three scope calculated members. One is DB level, which can be accessed by any guy because it is created at the DB level. Who has access to the cube can do that. Another one is connection level. If you create a calculated measure here, you can execute the same calculated measure n number of times in the same connection. And the third one is query level. So this will be stick to the query. You have to run the select statement as well as the the calculated measure expression together, then only it will be executed. And if you try to separate it and run only either the calculated member expression or only the query, it will not work. It should be always together. So that is called query scoped calculated member. That's it for today's session, guys. Thank you for joining and have a great day. See you tomorrow.